It's our Christmas podcast, and we hope to just give you some lovely tips with navigating these holiday times. So now, a word of wisdom for mommies with new babies entering this holiday season. You spend so much energy getting your baby into a routine, and I think often a fear around this time is, how am I going to keep this going? We may be going away, or we've got guests coming to our house. We might have to move rooms around.
But I think it's the same rule that applies to eating, and that's that whole 80-20. Stick to your routine as much as you can, and 20% of the time just allow for a little bit of flexibility. If it's going to be a late night, then try and get a nice longer nap in the day so that okay, at least your baby's covered from a sleep point of view.
What are we going to say, and how do we respond in those moments where people are giving judgment on our decisions? So much of it is about what makes you as the parent feel comfortable. But if you end up going to this restaurant and are totally frazzled and stressed out because your child's now missing their sleep, they're not sleeping, they're crying, they're overstimulated, and ultimately puts more pressure and anxiety on you, it's not worth it.
But again, like I say, it's just also having that flexibility, the special time with friends and family.
To keep your hopes high is that you will be able to re-establish that routine. It is possible. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Baby. This is our last podcast for 2023, and it's our Christmas podcast, and we hope to just give you some lovely tips with navigating these holiday times. But it's so exciting. The most exciting thing for me is that all three of us are present today. We've got our Sammy back after having her baby. So welcome back, Sammy. So nice to have you back.
Thanks so much, Kath. Nice to be back.
And of course, Dr. Jenny Rose, who you all know, and lovely to have you, as always, Jenny, to be part of our team.
Thank you, Kath. As always, so good to be here, and so looking forward to today's conversation.
Absolutely. So maybe let's start with you, Sammy, since we'll throw you in the deep end since you've been away for a while. Maybe you just want to tell everyone about your baby. That last time we spoke to you, you had a big tummy.
I did, yes. So my little one, Kyla, she was born at 41 weeks. She didn't want to leave the tummy. We evacuated her eventually. And she came out roaring and bright-eyed and awake, and we never ever had any of that sleepy, drowsy baby that you have to wake to feed. She initiated us into parenthood with fire. It was a shock to the system. I don't think anything can prepare you for being a parent. I think no matter even what your profession is, I think both of you guys can attest to that as well. No matter how much you know professionally, having your own is completely different. So it's been a very humbling journey, but an amazing one. And I can't believe it. She's almost, Saturday she's going to be 4 months. So we've had a few little speed bumps along the way, which I'm sure we'll also get into in a whole separate podcast. But for the most part, she's been an absolute joy, and we are absolutely loving the journey so far.
Amazing.
So wonderful. So now, a word of wisdom for mommies with new babies entering this holiday season. And, you spend so much energy getting your baby into a routine. And, they say the first 6 weeks you can kind of just let it go and just watch and see. But by 4 months, I assume you've established a fairly consistent routine. Well, you hope to, and maybe even better sleep routines and that. And I think often a fear around this time is, how am I going to keep this going? We may be going away, or we've got guests coming to our house. We might have to move rooms around. And maybe just a few tips, 1 or 2 tips that you could give to our new families that have new babies for this holiday season.
Yeah, I think it's something that can be such a stress because, especially if you've got a young baba where you've kind of almost where we are at the moment, we've just started to gain momentum with the routine, and now you can think of all the holiday festivities that are going to happen, and it just is enough to give you so much anxiety. But I think it's the same rule that like applies to eating, and that's that whole 80-20. So, try and stick to your routine as much as you can and where you can, 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time just allow for a little bit of flexibility, because I think it's so important that you don't want to look back down the line and say, oh, well, we didn't enjoy our time with our family and we didn't make the most of these holidays, because we were just so stressed around our baby's routine. But having said that, the flip side of the coin is you also just don't want the wheels to fall off completely, because then come the beginning of the year, you're back to square one and exhausted trying to get your baby back into a routine. So I think one of my tips would be also to, adapt your routine. So keep what you can in place, for the most part. So if you're having people over, obviously make your baby's room that you're going to put them down in a nap, or for bedtime, exactly the same. Try to do your bedtime routine. But, if you a little bit later, or that it's going to be a late night, then just adapt your day as well. So if it's going to be a late night, then try and get a nice longer nap in the day, so that okay, at least your baby's covered from a sleep point of view in terms of hours. So you just adapt it accordingly, or if you know that it's going to be broken naps, then just add in a little quick cat nap here and there just to make up for it. And then, if your little one uses a white noise machine and you're going to Granny and Grandpa's house, take it along with you. If they've got a special little doo-doo blanket or something, take it with you. So you kind of keep in that sleep association as much as you can, because obviously if you're in a completely new environment and there's a lot of festivity going around, it's going to be really difficult for your little one to go into their sleep routine and their nap routine. So if you can bring along things that are obviously easy to, so that they just know, okay, when my sound machine comes on, it's ready for nap time. Or for example, we use a Nurture One, and so if she's sleeping on her Nurture One, or we put her on a Nurture One, she'll know that it's nap time. But again, like I say, it's just also having that flexibility. The special time with friends and family doesn't come around often. And then also just know that if write a day off, if it's been an absolute manic terrible day, then just, it is what it is, and you just start again tomorrow, and you just try and keep your routine as much as possible to the next day. So you just do what you can.
I like that. I also think what I've often said to parents is that as quickly as it takes them to get out of a routine, you can reestablish that routine. And I think that's also something to keep your hopes high, is that you will be able to reestablish that routine. It is possible. And
exactly. It's not going to go off the rails for, one or two kind of mishap days and a little bit of disorganization. Once you get back into your work mode and your normal days, then you can just refocus on that.
I love that. Thanks, Jenny. So this time of year is very exciting because we get to see grannies and grandpas and aunts and uncles, but that also comes with its own challenges because obviously everyone brings up children differently, and everyone has their own ideas as to what are good routines and what are good foods to feed and what are good sleep patterns to have, and whether you should breastfeed in public or not, and whether you should have a bottle feed or breast, so there's just a lot. Like, do you give children sweets, or maybe children should never have sweets? So everyone's got their thoughts and everyone has a right to those. But how do we navigate that going into these family environments, which can be very exciting, lovely, but also can be potentially stressful? What tips do you have for families meeting up with family?
Yeah, Kath, I think there's a couple of things that would be important to try and put in place. I think one of the most important things is when we're talking about kids, we're so conscious and mindful of doing preparation for them when there's something new as they approach the holiday, prepping them for a different room and lots of people and, all the things that are coming. But we don't always apply the same rules to ourselves. And I think if we can just prep ourselves a little bit for what's to come in the holiday, we already eliminate a large portion of the anxiety. So if we can sit back and think a little bit about what it would look like with lots of people around us, everybody giving their 2 cents worth, and what we want to do in that moment and how we want to respond. If we can walk into those scenarios feeling like we are not with our backs against the wall and being scrutinized and feeling defensive, because that's where we often then come from a place of quite reactive, very defensive responses. And we want to rather be intentional about what are we going to say and how do we respond in those moments where people are giving judgment on our decisions as parents. We also know there's a very big difference in the generation of today's parents versus the way we were parented. And that is tricky because a lot of the older generation are coming in with, well, why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? And this is unacceptable behavior. So, for me, I think what's so important is to be able to prepare yourself around these conversations that typically could rear their heads and how you would like to respond. Because if we can eliminate our defensive,ness already, it's going to be an entirely different conversation. And then secondly, and it links a little bit to what Sammy was saying, when we're talking about routine and changing things up, to me, so much of it is about what makes you as the parent feel comfortable. So if you want to go for the big family lunch at a big restaurant and it means your little baby is going to miss a nap, if that is going to fill your cup and mean you're going to be able to parent better and you are going to be in a better space because of it, then absolutely do it and break the routine. But if you end up going to this restaurant and are totally frazzled and stressed out because your child's now missing their sleep, they're not sleeping, they're crying, they're overstimulated, and it ends up feeling like your whole afternoon is derailed and ultimately puts more pressure and anxiety on you, it's not worth it. And that's the same thing around this conversation around family is what are we going to do in those moments that ultimately serves us as parents? Because we want to remain as stable as we possibly can and have as few triggers and anxiety responses as possible. So we have to think about that. What does that mean? So when we have people scrutinizing us, how do we ensure that we're able to keep our own anxiety at bay?
That's so good. Yeah, I love that. I think it just comes down to that preconceived anxiety. And I love how you're saying you can actually decrease that just by planning in your mind responses to what you potentially know, because we all know our families and we generally know their thoughts. It's not a surprise. And it's also just choosing what you're going to discuss, what you're not going to discuss. Sammy and I have even had that conversation before, choosing like, do we discuss this with this person or with this group of people? Because they won't really have insight or understand. And it's just going to cause stress. And then other times, we will let's share with this person or not, and I think that preparation in your mind, because that's where the preparation sits, is in your mind.
And
so
ultimately
valuable.
what you're speaking to is boundaries, and that's what you have to determine before the holiday. What are my boundaries? What do I allow to come in? What conversations do I have? What conversations do I say, I'm not entering this conversation? It's not one that is even up for negotiation or input. So I think knowing what your boundaries are beforehand is such a critical part. And that leads me, Kath, to ask you a little bit around this. I think ties into boundaries as well, is how do we navigate holidays when it comes to food? And I think, especially with young children, it's a very different routine from their usual eating routine. A lot of treats, a lot of spoils, a lot of people in the family and the peripheral family that are wanting to indulge and give kids all sorts of things. How do we navigate that and our own boundaries around food during the holidays?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. And I think it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety, but it's similar what you both have been saying in the sense of that, as Sammy mentioned, the 80-20. So there is going to be some give and take during the holiday season. And that's important. So you also prepare your mind, like you said, Jenny, that your child will probably be exposed to a little bit more sweets or sugary foods or salty foods than what you normally would have given them, and that's okay. But at the same time, use the meals that you are able to have control over and make them and keep them healthy. And that applies even to us as adults. So, for example, breakfast doesn't have to be a festive breakfast every single day of the holiday. Breakfast can really be healthy. You can pack in there. You can do oats with peanut butter and chia seeds and keep their tummies working, So you can use the breakfast time a lot of the time as the one meal that you can really pack nutrition in there and some good ingredients and nutrients. And then you know that it's set them up for the day. Don't also be scared of having a supplement. So if your child's a bit older, you can have a nutritional supplement that you can give them and take along with you. If they're not going to eat the food that's often available, you got your picky eating challenges during this time where moms know, okay, they just won't eat food at someone else's house or what is available. Either bring a bit of the food they will eat with or a nutritional supplement that that'll just fill them up, keep them healthy, keep them going, and you're not anxiously worrying that they're going to be hungry and not have enough food. But remember that this is not forever. It's not their new eating pattern. And when it comes to treats, you can also have a Christmas treat box where you make it at the beginning kind of the holiday. And then when they get a treat from someone, they put it in the treat box. So they're not being allowed to eat the treat. And then you can moderate it over the holiday period and say you can choose a treat today from your Christmas treat box. And they know then that what the 10 treats Granny brought with from overseas can go in that treat box and they can choose one and navigate it like that. And then in the new year, if there's treats over, it can go into their weekly treat box management system. So I think those are my two that would be important, is find spaces for good nutritional meals, relax other times around the food, bring a nutritional supplement should they need it, if they are picky eaters particularly, and then manage treats by creating a little Christmas treat box that you can then help them manage over the festive season.
Amazing. So helpful. I have just come off this morning with my own kids of having a couple of days of being in this kind of festive treat mode, and it's the carols evening, and there's so many different events that spill over. And I had the same conversation this morning where I said, this morning is a healthy breakfast, and that is our philosophy going forward. And it's just so nice to hear what you say, because it resonates so much for a mom that's navigating this as well. And just to be able to say, right, this morning we need to ensure that we are starting our day right, and that this is actually what we're going to be doing every day of the holidays. It's not, shortbread and tea for biscuits for breakfast because that's what Granny bought. But actually, how do we start the day right?
Yeah, so I think that's, I love that. So thanks ladies. I think this was so just helpful, and I wish you both a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all our listeners who maybe are not celebrating Christmas but just having a break and time off. Enjoy that time with family, and those of you that are celebrating, enjoy it and don't sweat the small stuff. Focus on the relationships. Those are the most important at the end of the day. Nourish your bodies, nourish your relationships, and have a Merry Christmas.